Thank you.
Very, very unfit.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks guys for coming. Brilliant film. I want to ask you first, Gareth. It's quite a complex narrative structure to the film, with lots of twists and turns and sort of layers. It turns into a film that kind of feeds on itself. How much of that was kind of there in the script? How much of it was in the edit? And like when you were planning it, did you have this kind of like detective-style nutty room where you have it all kind of laid out there, or was it just, you know?
To be totally honest, I did, yes. I had, you know, the chart on the wall that the Coulson character has. At one point I started putting plot ideas on a wall and just thought, someone's going to find me here in 2 years' time. The police are just going to find me, so I better stop this. But yeah, I did at one point. But most of it was planned and scripted. Excuse me. But it's weird. Lots of things sort of came to us during the process. So for instance, the car sequence at the end with the warping road and the crash. That was in the script, and then we took it out for budget reasons. We're a very small film. I mean, Jack Guttmann here spent ages thinking, how can we work around this crash? And then once we filmed everything, we were in the edit, we sort of found ways to bring the crash back in. It's a strange thing that the film kind of seems to be telling you, I want to be a certain way. But it does seem to be that way. It just sort of works out in the end.
Yeah, so it's how long did it take you to write the script?
Well, I'm 42, so about 42 years.
Okay.
Actually, I'm 43. Shit, I just remembered.
You had a year off, gap year.
Yeah, exactly. But it was ideas that were old, that were about 10 years old, but they were on a kind of pile of ideas marked. We'll do that someday when somebody gives me £1 million to make a film. And then I slowly realised no one's ever going to give you any money to make a film. And then I worked as an actor with Ben Wheatley on a film called Down Terrace, which people might remember. And I remember thinking, well, Ben rang me and said, I'm making a film, you want to be in a film? I'm making a film. And I said, yeah, I'll be in a film, thinking he's never going to make a film. And I said, when are you shooting? Expecting to go in like 6 months. He said, next week. So I went down and did it, and thought, wow, they seem to really know what they're doing, and they don't have much money. And then I saw the film and thought, holy shit, this is like a proper film. And that was the galvanising thing in making me go, maybe I can revisit those old ideas, but do it on a tiny budget somehow.
Absolutely. And Tom, as an actor, what was it like for you trying to do this thing where you've got to keep sort of multiple kind of versions of the character, if you like, in your head? How do you kind of keep that straight, and how much did you get from Gareth in terms of like that process?
But nothing but opposition from me.
Well, I got obviously I got a lot from Gareth because it's Gareth wrote it, and because I helped produce it as well. We worked. That's a lot on it. Often you don't get a chance to rehearse as much as we did, but we worked very hard on the rehearsal to make sure that it was right. Because I've done in the past, I've done comedy, so this is one of my first serious roles. So I was quite nervous about it. Usually I sort of get my balls out on stage and do that sort of thing instead. This was very different.
You're lucky that hasn't happened so far. So it
still can. It's still
time.
Still can. I've got tight trousers on. They're compacted. It was working really hard with Gareth, and then obviously working with other great actors helps, because in some ways the character is sort of manipulated by everyone around him. So in some ways I had an easy job than some of the other people, because I would sit there and look furrowed and mostly perplexed throughout the entire thing, which was easy to do because I was perplexed. Yeah.
And it's also difficult because the film obviously starts off as one thing and then sort of shifts gear, but the audience aren't told that they're in a fantasy. They think, well, this is supposed to be real. So that's a difficult thing to pull off for all the cast.
And was it difficult if you're playing a character with depression who is saying that he's got depression but might actually have depression? I mean, how do you sort of one-way performance around that.
Well, it's interesting because obviously in the film it's vague and it's purposely sort of ambiguous. But we talked about it and treated it as he's two characters, and they're very simple. It's the cool cop, which is there that you see, and then he has depression. But the vagueness in between was really sort of a result of me as an actor as well. Not quite, it's keeping up with it in a way, and it's sort of those different levels. Sorry, that didn't make much sense, that sentence.
We had two shirts. That's the real.
Oh, yeah, we
we
did have
had
two
two shirts. We had a cool cop shirt, and then an almost identical depressed shirt that we brought in.
There you go.
So,
These are your hot filmmaking tips. I always have two
that's
shirts.
the real key to the performance. Two shirts.
Jack, it was a 10-day shoot. I hear the initial shoot.
Yeah.
How do you make that work? I mean, how?
We've at the time and since been talking about it as this kind of heist mentality, because we had so little time and so much to get that we really had to be nailing everything at each point and really work our work, like almost plan it shot by shot. And our Ben Pritchard, our amazing DOP, pretty much in pre-production went through, he put the time in, went through with us to, really work through everything. And then it was kind of like keeping that on point on the day. But we had such an amazing crew who had that level of commitment to this film and project, which, came from the script, which was amazing, and people getting behind, the idea, and, it was really just people really believing in this film and being able to deliver that sort of level of commitment to this kind of project, and that's what kind of got it made in that short amount of time, I think.
I also think that it's a bad thing to say at Q&A, but in order to do a film in 10 days, you have to be really boring, just really dull. You can't afford any good stories, because if you have a good story, you don't have a film. So you hear all these filmmakers saying, like Werner Herzog, or, goes up river with Klaus Kinski with a gun, and I'm thinking, what's the first AD thinking during all this? Is somebody looking at their watch going, where's the director? So we don't have any cool stories, but we've got a film.
Gareth, can I ask you, was there an initial image or idea that was the kind of spark of this? Like, you've got this kind of sort of Ouroboros kind of narrative that kind of eats itself. Was that the kind of initial idea, or was there did that come later?
It was actually driving or being driven up the. Makes me sound like a driver being driven. I just happened to be a passenger up the M1 and seeing signs for the north, and I remember thinking, for some reason, about a sort of looping road, which had probably been done before actually, but anyway, that sort of element of it. But I think all the stuff about Möbius strips and the Klein bottle, I've just got too much time on my hands and access to Google. We had to get that Klein bottle sort of shipped from America. That was about a tenth of the budget. That bottle. There's this crazy guy in America that makes them. It doesn't seem to do anything else. His business makes Klein bottles. He was probably overjoyed when we got in touch. We're probably his first and last customer. But yeah. I mean, there are all kinds of different images in there, I guess, that I've collected over the years and just found some way of stringing them together.
And for you, Tom, was there a kind of image or kind of idea that you had in your head for your character in terms of this is who this guy is?
Gareth. God, no, I don't know if I did have that. I suppose I was just sort of creating very, in a self-conscious way. I was just trying to sort of create it. And I suppose I did think about the sort of physicality of it as well, because I've done physical comedy and things in the time, and although this isn't outright physical comedy, to try and sort of walk with a stoop and sort of try and change that as the character went on from cool to depressed, and also to try and make that sort of become even worse. So at the end, when he goes and visits Kathleen, and you think he might shoot her, but that's his lowest point. I was really trying to make that compact and make myself as small as possible, I suppose. So
occasionally we'd go, "Where's Tom?" and Tom would be off somewhere going into some dark place, and then emerge. And I'd go, all right, better start filming now. Action.
Very cheery shoot.
Yeah, it was good fun.
You got a great cast in the film, fantastic cast. How did you get them? How did you assemble those people? Was it all just people that you knew before?
It was most basically, yeah. We worked with virtually everybody apart from the two therapists. Were the only people we hadn't worked with before, and they turned out they were absolutely brilliant. But I think that's important if you're doing a low budget thing. Is if you can surround yourself with people that you trust. You kind of go, okay, well, I know that they're going to do a good job, and I think that sort of helps smooth anything.
We were lucky because both me and Tom have been on the comedy circuit, but along the way we've met people who we just know are also really good actors. So people like Alice Lowe, Dan Skinner, Rufus Jones, and all the rest of them. Without that, I don't think it would have worked. We wouldn't have been able to hire a cast of that calibre. It was just going, please, can you help us out for a couple of days?
Yeah, I think also might be being a little bit modest. It's also on the strength of the script, because those guys wouldn't have done it if the script wasn't as good as it was, and they didn't back Gareth to make the film that he was going to make. So I think
they
that
probably only read their bits of the script though.
Maybe, but their parts were good enough for them to read and want to do it. And
3 pages they read.
Well, it's true. I think that's a good point because Paul Kay, for example, was in the middle of filming Game of Thrones, and he had this sort of sliver of time, and he read the script and just said he really wanted to do it, and we had to shoot his bit in about sort of 2-3 hours probably really quickly, and he'd stayed up all night to learn the thing, and he just totally learnt it off by heart, and I think that's sort of like a sign of how much he wanted to do the film. And,
when you have an actor like Jeffrey McGivern, who plays the therapist, who's fantastic, and how do you pitch it to him? How do you pitch it to someone like him? Because we talked about earlier, it's in a way it's quite a hard film to pitch, or a hard film to kind of talk about.
Well, me and Tom were sat around thinking of approaching Jeff McGivern and Niamh Cusack, neither of whom we knew. And I remember looking online of a clip of Niamh Cusack in a clip of her opposite Jeremy Irons in some Shakespeare thing, thinking, can we really approach this Niamh Cusack with our poxy little film? But they were great. They just threw themselves at it completely, and they're both in different ways brilliant. I think. I mean, I'm biased, but I think Niamh is just, you can't quite tell what's going on with that character. She's kind of warm, but she's sort of a bit distant as well. And then Jeff could have played that character in all kinds of ways, or it could have been played all sorts of ways, but he just brings such kind of warmth and humour to it that it really sort of saves it.
You mentioned before about your kind of background in comedy, and I wanted to ask about because obviously there's been a whole kind of spate of films. We've had Steve Oram here, obviously with R, and Ben Wheatley, you've mentioned before, and Alice Lowe, who's in the film you've worked with. What's the connection between comedy and genre filmmaking, and is it just you guys in that kind of group, or do you think there's a wider kind of connection?
I don't know. There's something going on with this, because Steve Oram and
I was in a double act and still am. We still do gigs, live gigs with Steve Oram, and I've read his new script, which is amazing. He showed out here last year. He's got a new one, which is fantastic, that he's hoping to shoot next year.
Is it going to offend the royal family?
I'm not sure. I don't think anyone gets their penis chopped off. Okay. But I think we all did live stuff incidentally and ironically at Ealing Live Studios. At Ealing Studios, there was a live comedy night, and that's how we all started working together, and we worked together for a few years.
So it's like Tom, me, Steve Oram, Alice Lowe, and then other people that people might know from other movies like Simon Farnaby. And there's a sort of core of people on the same comedy circuit who are now somehow all making sort of genre films. Like Alice has got Prevenge, just doing the festival circuit at the moment. So yeah, there's definitely some sort of, I don't know what the I suppose it's the old thing about comedy. This is not really a horror film, but comedy and horror being kind of similar in some strange way.
You've all just got dark minds.
Very possibly, just
Probably the link.
I think there was just something in the water in the 80s that just affected our development.
Great. I'd like to open it up to the audience. Has anybody in the audience got a question? If we just see anybody out there.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the film. It's a question for Tom, actually. You kind of I feel like you semi-answered it in the Q&A, but your character did have to go to some really dark places. And with you saying it was a 10-day shoot, I can imagine them being really long days as well.
Yes.
Were you literally able to switch on and off at the end of those days, or did you find it quite hard to detach?
I think I was basically wired for that entire time, which maybe added. Most of it is sort of sequential, so when I'm looking more and more tired, it's probably reflecting how I was. It was very intense. I mean, we shot most of the dialogue and sort of, scenes in 10 days, and then we actually did sort of like 2 or 3 days where we were out with just me and the cameraman on a lot of the streets and wandering around London, so that was a bit more relaxed. But the dialogue stuff was, super intense. And
also, because Tom was the producer of a micro-budget film, he's having to do a big, intense scene, and then when the scene's finished, go, okay, so how many vegetarian lasagnas are there? So we've got 5 meat lasagnas and what stuff, and then go back and go, oh, Christ.
And that also has to the detriment sometimes of film life. We shot the night shoots that we did that at the motorway in one night. It was our night shoot that happened to be on the longest day of the year.
It's worst planned night shoot ever.
Yeah. We had about an hour of actual night.
I don't think it ever got dark.
It didn't actually.
No, not really.
Happy accident though, it looked beautiful.
Yeah. And on the night shoot, so the inside of the car was obviously not a moving car. That's so we shot that in a garage in Twickenham. We'd had permission to be in the garage in Twickenham, just sneak in. And we tried all sorts of things. We tried green screen, and that didn't really work. We didn't really have the budget for that to light it properly. We tried back projection. That was a waste of time. I think that was my idea. And in the end, we just had. If you see, there's a few shots where Tom is driving,
Acting,
doing his pretending, and there's a car behind, and that car is actually 2 pound shop torches gaffer taped to a cling film box. Somebody just going. But it looks like a car. So,
Magic of cinema.
Magic of cinema.
Anyone else? Any other questions out there? Yes, just over. We just got a mic on to you. Sorry.
Yeah, wanted to ask about locations because what London's like to get around, and you were shooting in a lot of very different looking places.
Yeah.
Did you have like one location where you were able to dress different rooms for different scenes and things like that? To stop
You
people
know.
roaming around?
You know the secrets.
Yeah.
Jack.
So we were kind of lucky, but also took an opportunity when we got it. And actually, my parents decided to go away for 3 months on a kind of 60-year-old's gap year. And it was like, okay, we've got this 3-month window where that house has become available. And so it's like, okay, well, we've been talking about the film and we're in pre-production. It's like, okay, well, we've got to start now. And so that house became unit-based, production office, everything. And then also
2-story locations.
2-story locations, exterior locations. And so we just used that for everything. And then it was people we knew, people who were helping us on the film. We used their offices, friends, exteriors. We really, sort of just got it everywhere we could.
Your parents have only just seen the film, and are they still speaking to you?
Yeah, they don't know what was going on behind the camera and the chaos that goes on behind the camera. They just sort of thought, he's moved a bit of things around, that's fine. But it was a bit of a mess and took me a while to sort out. But they were away for a while, so it was
But my big revelation on the film was because the standard sort of received wisdom on a low budget thing is you have one location, and loads of fantastic films are an abandoned warehouse or whatever. If you can make that work, that's brilliant. But I just couldn't. I was trying to come up with like a killer idea that was, some intense situation in one location, and I'm still looking for that killer idea. But this was, as you say, roving around all over the place. But we just realised, maybe I'm a bit slow on the uptake, but we realised the crew are all going home at the end of the day anyway. We're not putting them in a hotel, so they may as well just come to a different part of London the next day, basically. And so hopefully it's resulted in a film that looks, much bigger, and has, it gives you all, filming in different parts of London just gives you all these different textures, upscale and then Hackney as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. Anybody else? Any other questions out there? Yeah, just at the back there.
Since you've done like a psychological horror / thriller, what is the trick to come up with something like that without being like a jump scare fest that you usually see in other, types of films?
Yeah, we weren't really. We're happy to be at a genre festival because we think it does have, genre elements. It's a crime film, but it's not a standard procedural. It's not really a horror film, but it kind of is. It sort of has horror elements kind of creeping in. But also, I don't know whether this answers your question, but I felt that I wasn't ready to make a sort of physically scary film. This was what was naturally in my head. And in a way, like one of the next ideas that I've got is to do something a bit more kind of visceral, if you like, a bit more physical, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But our budget just meant that it's essentially a kind of series of two-handers, really, conversation pieces in disguise. And I think that Ben Pritchard, our DOP, has made it hopefully seem very cinematic, but that's at its core, it's a load of conversations rather than. But I don't think there's anything wrong with jump scares, but we just couldn't. We couldn't afford them. Is the short answer.
You worked a lot with atmosphere in the film, didn't you? I think the soundtrack also kind of really helps with that. And, what were the notes that you gave for the composer?
Well, the composer is another person that we know from the comedy circuit who, a few years back, he was doing a character who was what would you say, a glam rock or a sort of new wave 80s parody of Gary Newman, basically. And he started to teach himself. I think he was a music. Well, he's not really. Anyway, he started mucking around with making music. He's got a guy named Wayne Shepherd, who I think is his
in
genius.
R, actually.
He's in R. He's in this film, of course, in a cameo. He's Gav, that Paul Kaye's mate. And he's able to sort of he just works with a computer, but I'm convinced he's got an orchestra tied up in a basement somewhere because he just gets these amazing soundscapes. And he would give me loads of stuff, was basically the process. He'd give me dozens of tracks, and then I would edit with them as a kind of temp, instead of a temp track, because I hate editing with music you can't use, just in case you fall in love with something. And then I would butcher his compositions and cut them up and combine things and lay them across one another, and I'd take them back to him and he'd go, "Fucking hell, what have you done? Oh, Gareth, fuck's sake." And then he'd sort of slowly come around. And that was it wasn't really notes, it was just kind of me being passive-aggressive and saying, this is the way it's going to be.
That obviously works, passive-aggressive behaviour obviously pays off. I'd like to thank all three of you for coming and bringing the Ghoul to us. It's fantastic to have you here, fantastic to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks a lot, the Ghoul.